I gave him everything, my trust, my savings, even my future. But one night, I overheard him laughing with his parents, bragging about how he used me. That was the moment I stopped being the victim, and started becoming someone they'd regret ever messing with. Noah had always been the type of person who found fulfillment in hard work. A 32-year-old department manager at a prestigious company, she had carved a niche for herself through years of dedication and unwavering commitment. Her colleagues admired her boss praised her, and her career trajectory was on a steady climb. She was content, feeling secure in her professional achievements, but when it came to her personal life, something was missing. For years, Noah had been single, focused on her career, and unsure of what she was missing. But then came Matthew. He was charming, kind, and easy to talk to, and the two quickly hit it off at a friend's dinner party. Their chemistry was instant. They shared the same interests, enjoyed long conversations, and seemed to complement each other perfectly. Soon, Matthew confessed his feelings for Noah, and their friendship blossomed into a relationship. They began spending more time together, and before long, Matthew proposed. Noah, swept up in the excitement of being with someone who truly understood her, said yes. Their wedding day was a dream come true. Noah felt like the luckiest woman alive as she stood next to Matthew, surrounded by friends and family. His parents welcomed her with open arms, showering her with compliments. "We're so proud of our son for finding such a beautiful, successful woman," they said, making Noah blush. In her heart, she felt that their marriage was the beginning of something wonderful, something that would balance her life with love and security. She had found the perfect partner, someone who appreciated her achievements and supported her ambitions. For the first 6 months, everything seemed perfect. Noah and Matthew settled into a routine, enjoying their newlywed life. They both worked hard but always made time for each other. Noah was thrilled to have him home after a long day at work, and he seemed equally happy to be around her. They made plans for the future, and Noah couldn't help but imagine the family they would one day have. She was ready to embrace the next chapter of her life, filled with love, adventure, and shared dreams. But little did she know, the story was about to take an unexpected turn. As Noah thought about her future, she could never have predicted how quickly things would unravel. Would she be able to continue down this path of happiness, or was something more complicated looming just around the corner? It was a question that would soon consume her thoughts and challenge everything she believed about love and loyalty. The first crack in Noah's seemingly perfect marriage appeared one ordinary evening when Matthew, her husband of just 6 months, brought up a topic that caught her off guard. As they sat down after dinner, he casually mentioned that he had been thinking a lot about their living situation. "I think it would be a good idea if we moved in with my parents," he said, his tone casual, almost as if he were suggesting they take a weekend trip. Noah blinked in surprise, not quite understanding. "What do you mean, live with your parents?" she asked, her voice a mix of confusion and curiosity. Matthew, ever the pragmatic one, explained that his parents were getting older, and he felt a deep responsibility to care for them. Being an only child, he didn't have any other family members to rely on. He gently suggested that it would be more economical for them to live under the same roof, especially since they were already planning a home renovation. His parents, after all, had more than enough space, and this arrangement would help ease the financial burden of the project. Noah could sense that he was hesitant, almost apologetic, but there was no mistaking the determination behind his words. Noah had always been a person who believed in supporting her partner, no matter the cost. She had seen how hard Matthew worked and how much he cared about his parents. She understood the weight of his responsibility and his love for them. Though the thought of living with his parents felt strange, especially so soon after their marriage, she could not deny her sense of duty to him. "All right," she said, her voice soft, but resolute. "We'll make it work." But as they discussed the logistics of the plan, more complications began to surface. The renovation was going to cost significantly more than they had anticipated, around $100,000. Matthew, trying to mask his discomfort, admitted that his family was deep in debt, about $150,000, to be exact. The revelation hit Noah hard. She had never been made aware of this financial strain before. They had always presented a picture of stability, both emotionally and financially, but now everything seemed uncertain. Matthew seemed genuinely sorry, but his words of reassurance felt hollow. "I've been trying to help my parents, but it's been difficult," he explained, his voice shaky. "I don't want you to worry about this, but I need you to help me. If you could pay for the renovations and help clear some of the debt, we can make it work." Noah was stunned, caught between her love for Matthew and the overwhelming sense of betrayal that was starting to creep into her mind. She had never signed up for this kind of responsibility, shouldering the financial burdens of his family, let alone taking on their debts. But in that moment, Noah chose to put her trust in him, believing that they could work through it together. With a heavy heart, she agreed. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll help. But this needs to be the last time." As Noah threw herself into paying off the debts and managing the renovation, her sense of unease grew. She didn't know if it was the weight of the financial strain or the growing realization that things weren't as they seemed, but the happiness she once felt in her marriage began to fade. Would her decision to support Matthew's family truly bring them closer together, or was it the first step in a journey that would tear their lives apart? The answers seemed to lie just beyond reach, waiting for her to uncover them. Little did she know, the next few months would reveal truths that would forever alter the course of her life. The weight of Noah's decision to pay off her in-laws' debt began to settle heavily on her shoulders, each passing day feeling more like a battle than a partnership. When she first agreed to help, she believed it was a temporary sacrifice, something that would eventually lead to a better future for both her and Matthew. But now, as the weeks passed, the pressure was mounting, and she found herself drowning in a sea of financial strain. At first, the payments were manageable, but as Noah continued to dip into her savings to cover the mounting debts, it became clear that the strain wasn't just financial. Matthew's increasing distance, both emotionally and physically, only added to her burden. He had promised to contribute, but his excuses were always the same: "My salary isn't enough," or "It's just too much for me right now." Noah had hoped, perhaps naively, that he would step up, take responsibility, especially after everything she was doing. But with each passing day, she realized he was more of a passenger in this marriage than a partner. The more she sacrificed, the more isolated she felt. Her once thriving career, which had brought her so much pride and fulfillment, now seemed like a distant memory. Between working long hours and managing the financial crisis at home, Noah had little time or energy left for herself. The simple joys she used to take for granted, like spending an afternoon at a coffee shop with friends or even just reading a book, were now luxuries she could no longer afford. All of her energy was consumed by the effort to pay off the debts, and it seemed like there was no end in sight. Despite all of this, Noah tried to push forward, telling herself that this was a phase, just a temporary challenge they would overcome together. But the truth was, it was beginning to feel like a trap. Every day, she felt more like a provider, a caretaker, rather than a wife. Matthew's role seemed to diminish, and her sense of duty to his family grew. But in this role, she was slowly losing herself. The house they had remodeled together, which once seemed like a symbol of their unity, now felt like a cage. Noah couldn't help but wonder if she had made a mistake, if the sacrifices she was making were worth the cost. Her feelings of emotional distress were further amplified when she discovered that Matthew's spending habits had not changed. She had noticed small signs, a new gadget here, a spontaneous shopping trip there, but it wasn't until one fateful evening that Noah was hit with a sobering realization. She had asked him, for the umpteenth time, about his finances. "How are we going to manage this?" she asked, her voice barely hiding the frustration building up inside. But instead of answers, she was met with silence. When she demanded to see his pay stubs to get a better understanding of their financial situation, he refused. "You don't need to see that," he said dismissively, avoiding her gaze. That was the moment it hit her. Matthew wasn't just emotionally absent, he was financially irresponsible, too. The burden she had so willingly taken on was not only hers to bear. She had become the sole provider, the sole caretaker, and it was taking a toll on her. Every time she opened her bank account to transfer more money, every time she saw another bill piling up, the weight of it all crushed her a little more. Despite her overwhelming sense of being trapped, Noah kept moving forward, driven by a mixture of love, duty, and perhaps a lingering hope that things would get better. But with every passing day, that hope seemed to slip further away. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing herself in this marriage, and that perhaps Matthew had already given up on her. But even in her darkest moments, Noah clung to the idea that she was doing this for love, for the family that she had hoped would one day appreciate her sacrifices. However, as time wore on, Noah began to question whether the love she was offering was truly being reciprocated. Was it even possible for her to continue giving everything without receiving anything in return? Could she keep going down this path, sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of others, without losing herself completely? The answers to these questions were still unclear, but one thing was certain: Noah had to make a choice. Would she continue to be the martyr, or would she find a way to reclaim her own life? The journey ahead seemed uncertain, but Noah knew that the first step was acknowledging just how far she had fallen into the trap of sacrifice. Noah stood in the hallway, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she listened to the muffled conversation coming from the living room. The words were clear enough to pierce through the thick silence of the house, words that she could never have anticipated hearing. Her husband, Matthew, was speaking to his parents, his voice low but distinct, as though he had no idea she could overhear him. "You were right," he said with a laugh. "Marrying Noah was the best thing I ever did. She's got money, and she works for a big company. I've got her right where I want her. I can't believe I've convinced her to pay off all our debts. She's a real catch." Noah froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The shock hit her like a physical blow, a gut-wrenching twist that left her breathless. Her mind raced to process the words, but the hurt came faster than the logic. Matthew was admitting to manipulating her, using her love for him to secure his own position. He had been playing a part in their marriage, and she had been the fool. A fool who had believed in him, in their life together, in the future they had been building. Her hand shook as she gripped the edge of the doorframe, unable to move. The room seemed to close in around her. Was she hearing things? Was it some kind of cruel joke? But as she stood there, the reality of his words sank in, deep and unforgiving. She wasn't just a partner, she was a tool. A tool to fix their financial mess, and once that was done, she would be discarded, just like his parents had suggested. How could he? Noah thought, the question repeating itself over and over in her mind. She had been blindly supporting him, sacrificing her savings, her future, and her time to help him and his family. And for what? For a man who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. The weight of betrayal pressed down on her chest, suffocating her. It felt as though the ground beneath her feet had vanished, leaving her suspended in a moment of overwhelming disbelief. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. She couldn't let him see her break. Not now. As the conversation continued, Noah turned away from the door, her legs unsteady beneath her. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted in a quiet fury, threatening to consume her. She had spent months, no, years, believing in this marriage, believing in the love that Matthew had shown her. But now it was clear. It had all been a lie. She had been too blind to see it before, too trusting, too willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. But now, she saw everything. The subtle manipulations, the dismissive attitude toward her contributions, the way he had drained her emotionally and financially without a second thought. With each passing second, the reality of what she had just learned solidified in her mind. She had been betrayed, not just by him, but by everyone who had helped him hide the truth. It wasn't just Matthew who had betrayed her, it was his entire family. They had all played their part in deceiving her, and Noah had been too blind to see it. Her mind started to race as her emotions flared, and a plan began to form, cold and methodical. She could no longer stay in this marriage. It was over. She had given everything, and now it was time for her to take back control. It was time to think of herself, to stop sacrificing for people who didn't care about her. She knew what she had to do. Her marriage was a farce, built on lies and manipulation. The love she had once felt for Matthew was nothing more than a memory now, a faded echo of something that had never truly existed. The marriage was over. The only question left was how to get out, and Noah was already making her plans. The first step was clear: she had to end it. This was no longer about saving a marriage or fixing things for Matthew and his family. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her future. Divorce was the only option. Noah's heart was heavy with the weight of her decision, but the shock had given way to clarity. She would no longer be a victim in this twisted game. Matthew and his family had taken enough from her, and now it was time for her to take back what was hers. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was for sure: she was no longer going to be controlled by their lies. She would find a way out, and when she did, she would make sure they never had the chance to hurt her again. As she wiped the tears from her eyes, Noah made her first decisive move. She would no longer be the woman she would be someone stronger. Someone who would never again let betrayal define her life. Noah stood at the crossroads of a life she once believed was hers. The revelation of her husband's betrayal was like a thunderclap, the shockwaves still rippling through her mind. But now, as she gathered the pieces of her shattered world, a new feeling began to emerge. It was not just pain, but the stirrings of something much more powerful: empowerment. In the days that followed, Noah found herself weighing her options with a clarity she had never before experienced. It was time to take action. She couldn't remain in a marriage built on lies and manipulation. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road that would lead her to the independence and control she so desperately needed. She began the process of initiating the divorce, making sure every detail was in place. It wasn't just about separating from her husband, it was about reclaiming control over her life. Every consultation with her attorney was a step closer to taking back her autonomy. The legal process was overwhelming at times: complicated forms, deadlines, and meetings, but with each passing day, Noah felt more resolute. She was not the victim here. She was the one who would shape her future. The divorce proceedings took several months, but as Noah navigated the complexities of legal battles, she also found herself strengthening emotionally. Every meeting with her attorney, every step she took to ensure her financial stability, built her confidence. She was not only asserting her right to live without betrayal, but she was also asserting her right to thrive. No longer would she rely on the financial stability of a man who had used her to escape his own responsibilities. When it came to securing alimony, Noah took a firm stand. Her husband had built his life on deceit and had expected her to be complicit. But she was done being the one to make sacrifices. With the support of her legal team, Noah secured alimony payments that would help her maintain her financial independence and ensure that she didn't just survive, but thrived. The court also ruled that her husband's affair partner, who had benefited from the deceit, was also held responsible for part of the alimony. The shock of Matthew's betrayal echoed even further, but Noah was determined that the financial consequences would be just as far-reaching. The process wasn't easy. There were moments of self-doubt and fear, but as Noah learned more about her legal rights, a sense of pride began to take root. She wasn't just fighting for her money or material possessions, she was fighting for her self-worth. She had spent years supporting Matthew's dreams, covering his mistakes, and managing his debts. Now, it was her turn to have her own future, her own dreams, and to live without fear of betrayal. Through the divorce process, Noah realized that the key to her empowerment was not just financial security, but emotional freedom. For too long, she had been tethered to a life dictated by someone else's decisions. The legal actions she took were the first steps in building a new foundation for herself, one where she no longer had to endure disrespect and manipulation. As the alimony checks came in, Noah made sure to put every cent toward securing her financial independence. She invested in her future, in herself. Her newfound sense of self-worth grew with each passing day. Noah could now see her value, not just in the context of a marriage, but as an individual with limitless potential. She began to thrive in ways she hadn't even imagined. Her career took on a new meaning, and her personal life started to shift toward fulfillment and peace. She no longer felt the weight of someone else's debts on her shoulders. She had learned the hard way what it meant to stand up for herself, and now, she was learning what it meant to live for herself. The empowerment Noah felt wasn't just about money or status, it was about reclaiming her sense of agency. She was no longer the woman who had given everything for a marriage built on illusions. She was now a woman who had taken control, who had navigated through the darkest moments of her life and emerged stronger. She had learned that her worth was not determined by her role in someone else's life, but by the choices she made for herself. As Noah looked toward the future, she did so with a sense of hope and purpose. She had broken free from the chains of betrayal and had built a life where her happiness and well-being came first. She had found her voice, and with it, she was determined to continue living life on her terms. Her journey was not over, but the direction was clear. Noah had reclaimed her independence, and in doing so, she had reclaimed herself. The path ahead would be filled with new challenges and opportunities, but for the first time in years, Noah faced them with confidence and strength, knowing that the power to shape her future was entirely in her hands. As Noah looked back on the tumultuous journey she had endured, the woman who stood in a mirror was not the same person who had walked into that marriage years ago. She was stronger now, forged in the fires of betrayal and loss, but tempered with newfound wisdom. The shock of discovering her husband's infidelity had shaken her to her core, but it had also sparked something inside her, an awakening. She had learned to take control of her life, to put herself first, and to embrace her own strength. Throughout her journey, Noah faced unimaginable emotional turmoil, but each challenge only brought her closer to understanding her own worth.